Yo, 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 what's good, YouTube? What's good? It's Stormy B-Man, and I am back. We are back this evening with a new Kung Fu film focus. That's right, Stormy B-Man is resuming talking about the Kung Fu film genre, the films that many of us who have been around a while, at least over 30 to 40 years old, can recall a time when these films played on the big screen in America, across the land. Kung Fu films have always had a huge impact on its viewing audience, whether it was the introduction of the culture of Asia, where they began to import how they interpreted stories with familiar themes, whether it was bandits, prostitution, rebels against the establishment or the government. They always had their own particular take on what was happening. And they handled matters with weaponry and hand-to-hand combat, which we know today as martial arts. These films always took on familiar themes that we could relate to in America. And this particular film we're covering this evening, Dynasty of Blood, aka Chinese Vengeance, aka the original title, Blood Brothers. And this film was produced by the Shaw Brothers. It came out in 1973. And the most simplistic explanation of the story that was the Blood Brothers was this film was set in the late years of the Chang Dynasty. And it is based on a real circumstance that took place, where this was a story of betrayal and revenge in Chinese history. And the director of this film, Chang, who directed so many of the classics out of the Shaw Brothers studio, particularly from the mid-60s through the late 70s. And he often had various groups of actors that he worked with. Starting out, his first $1 million star was Jimmy Wong Yu. And Jimmy Wong Yu later moved on to more independent choices in his career that allowed Chang to develop other acts that were already in the Shaw Brothers studio. And the familiar names that popped up for this particular film were David Chang Tai Wei and Tai Lung. These two men played in several features with the Shaw Brothers, where they were either playing opposite one another as foes or they were united in arms as brothers. Later to come along and join them was Chen Kwai Tai. Chen Quan Tai was a monkey-style martial artist and also developed his own career within the Shaw Studios as a rebellious fighter and was noted for films such as Man of Iron and The Boxer from Shangtung, films like that. And he would later move on to his own independent career outside of Shaw Studios and was famous in a film called Iron Monkey, the original Iron Monkey from the late 70s. So these men all teamed up for this film, which was considered at the time a big budget epic in the Shaw Brothers studio, taking place again, as I said, in the Chang Dynasty. The many titles that this film had were basically based on what region you may have seen it. Chinese Vengeance was one of the original titles when it was released internationally. Dynasty of Blood also followed that in various regions where the film was released. but the original overall title is The Blood Brothers. And as I go on to talk about the film, you'll understand later why that title was really the essential title of the film, as well as, you know, the impression that it left on viewing audiences. It's actually one of my favorite films, and a number of the Hong Kong films were released in the U.S., typically running in at 90 minutes or less. And even after seeing this film on VHS way back in the day, in the late 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, this film usually ran at 90, 95 minutes. But I was astonished to learn that it was actually a 118-minute film. And typically when a film is like that, as far as the martial arts genre, it may have been cut due to violence or sex, you know, and not people having sex, but just nudity overall and things like that. So that was one of the things that we found with this particular film. It was cut due to the violence. Chang was one of those directors who really enjoyed bloodshed amongst brethren in his films. They were noble warriors and were known to literally lay their guts on the line. And he enjoyed displaying that to the audiences. He believed that the audiences craved blood, so he believed in delivering. And boy, did he deliver in this particular epic. Blood Brothers is one of those films that if you've ever seen it, you can consider it one of the classics amongst, you know, whatever you've had a chance to view in the past. David Chang and Tai Lung, they played very well off of one another, and the thing that they would do most of all is show that whatever their chemistry was, whether they were fighting against each other or fighting alongside one another, it came across on screen, because Tai Lung, was a taller man, more strapping, and Chang Tai was a smaller, slight man, skinny, slender, and there was a contrast there as well. But many people didn't know that these two guys really didn't like each other behind the scenes. They didn't get along very well. There were some personal things that went down early in their careers, but they were able to put their differences aside when the cameras rolled, and the audiences benefit from, you know, them playing great, you know, off of one another. So that's one of the things that we can actually look back on and realize, like, wow, this is it's amazing that, you know, that was the type of dynamic that they shared on screen. But it's true. It's very true. And neither of them would deny it. But although Tai Lung is more of a noble guy, you know, he's like, even today, he like wears bow ties and stuff like that. He's a very, you know, casual guy as far as his demeanor. But he did come across as, you know, a person that, you know, he was very even-handed, how he was as his personality. But his roles that he played in the film, he had a great deal more range than the average kung fu film star. And Tai Lung is revered for a lot of movies, you know, so that's one of the things that he gave the Shaw brothers, and he was a loyal customer with a loyal subject with the Shaw studio. In this film, these guys were Chang Tawa and Chen Kwa Tai played brothers that were robbers. They were bandits that lived in the mountains and the hills. They didn't come down into civilization or along with guys. You know, they didn't come into town because when they did come into town or catch people coming out on the outskirts of town, they looked to rob them. So they were like, you know, laid back in the cut in the mountains and would catch people coming up into the mountainside. And one day, this particular night, played by Tai Lung, he was roaming through, and they attempted to rob him, you know. And so when they saw him on the road, they figured they would attack him. And when he got off his horse to face them, he looked at both guys and he was like, "Oh, you're gonna, you know, ambush me." And, you know, Chen Kwai Tai was like, you know, "We need money, you know, and you seem to be carrying, you know, whatever." So they had a duel and found out that Tai Lung could really handle himself. Then even when both of them tried to take him on, he was able to handle both of them. So they was like, why not just become brothers, you know? And then but they were faking it, right? So he was like, you know what? I'll give you guys some money for being straight up men, telling me, you know, like what you want and everything. And he tossed them a bag of, you know, tails of money. And they were like, oh, we don't want handouts. You know, they rather defeat him for it than him to hand it over to him. So when they wouldn't accept the money, Chen Kwai Tai's wife, who was hiding in the cut, she ran by on a horse and scooped the money up and was like, hey, there's a time to fight and then there's a time to run. And she grabbed the money and she jetted out, and then they jetted out too. And Tai Lung was looking at them like, man, ain't this some stuff? These guys are like out here laying up, got the whole thing planned out. So as he went on about his business, they were back in their lair, you know, counting up the money and everything and celebrating that they had robbed him and all of that. And next thing you know, he shows up on their set, you know. And it was at that time that they had a conversation. He was like, this little money that you took, it ain't going to last long. He was like, but I can show you how to make money last, you know. And then they were looking at him like, who the hell is this dude? And the way he was talking to them, he was talking with no fear. He was talking with no sense of whatever they did mattered or whatever, because whatever he had in mind was much further along the way and everything. And so that's when they became brothers. Now, to take a step back on this particular film, it opens with the court scene where Chang Tao-wai, David Chang, just above me here, he's in the courts and he's on trial. And what he's on trial for is going to be revealed as the story goes along in the film. But he asked the court to give him paper and ink so he can write the story down. So in his own words, he didn't want to tell the court what happened. He wanted to document it so that it become fact and that it would be admissible as what comes from him. So he sat down and began to write the story up. And as he write the story up, the movie backtracks and, you know, shows you how things unfolded as a flashback. And this was excellent. Chang Che, it was one of the first films that he did in this manner, where it came across as like he was, you know, what's his name? Christopher Nolan or something, with his films like Inception or, you know, stuff like that, where you go back and tell the story after this. You start off at the end and you tell the story going back. So it was a different way of storytelling for Chang Che and the Kung Fu films in general. And some films began to, you know, adopt this, as it was a very successful formula as the film opened up. I'm going to go back for a moment and acknowledge everybody that's in the chat. We got Derek Bailey out there. We got Curtis Anderson out there. Salute to you, Kurt. And more of E. Woodson. Dark Truth is out there. And Philip Carl Roberts has joined us. And Eric R. He says, I love Five Deadly Venoms, and The Master of the Flying Guillotine. Yeah, those are classics, Eric R. But there are so many more. There are actually hundreds of kung fu films that are classics and well worth the time, and then there are, many that are, you can sit through them, and then there are a host of bad ones. But the films that I try to review are the ones that are more impactful on the genre, the stars and who made them, the directors who made them, and overall a display of what was most noteworthy of these type of films. I actually love kung fu films that tell a story, whether it's visually or whether it's through the action. And as soon as, the films began to take a turn in the direction of storytelling and the performances of the martial arts stars, the genre grew by leaps and bounds. The way that they started out initially making these films were that most of the actors who played in them originally were not martial artists. They were just, actors who took on the films, and they were like stars, who get put before the cameras, but they weren't necessarily, they had stuntmen filling in for them and things like that. And the action choreographers began to say, hey, we need people who are more athletic, at least if they don't know martial arts, at least allow them to be more athletic so that we can teach them the moves and everything to, put on screen. And that's what you began to see in the transition. Jimmy Wong Yu, who was like an Olympic style athlete, knew no martial arts, but he was a hell of a street fighter in real life. But his choreographed scenes were always very crude and rugged, and looked more like a guy who was a street fighter trying to fight in a martial arts film. When he moved on from Shaw Brothers, their in-house choreographers, Tong Ga and also Lau Char Young, when they choreograph fight scenes with more athletic fighters or principles of martial arts, you could see the quality of the fight scenes raise. Even though Jimmy Wong Yu starred in some great films with the Shaws, when he moved on and they got some of these other guys, like the two men you see in this picture here, David Chang Tawa and Chen Quan Tai, they were real martial artists. David Chang, he studied Wing Chun and some Hung Gar, and Chen Quan Tai studied monkey kung fu and Hung Gar. So it's like these guys became students of Lau Char Young, who can be, his martial lineage can be traced all the way back to Wong Fei Hung. So these guys, they were better stars in these type of films because they could actually do a lot of the choreography, whereas Jimmy Wong Yu was very limited. And he refused to try to learn martial arts to get better. So with his stubbornness, it allowed an avenue open for these more accomplished, physically accomplished stars. Shaw Brothers Studios had a dormitory where their actors and actresses stayed on the lot, and they were given salaries under a contract that was solid for 7 years. They couldn't go outside of their contract with any other studio. They had no say-so in the scripts that were written and they were asked to star in. Excuse me. And they could not really enjoy any of the profits for the films that they starred in. It was a studio, old school studio manner in which, like, the early Hollywood stages were back when studios first formed in America. and Run Shaw, who ran the Shaw Brothers studio along with his brothers, Run Me Shaw, and I forget the other brother's name, who was older and passed on. They all ran the studio like a business, and they enjoyed the maximum profits. However, they would issue bonuses from time to time, and their actors and actresses were also encouraged to not marry, because the fans were devoted to them in their singleness, you know, and not being married within the studio career. Audiences took to them more. It was like there was something about chastity that in Asia at that time, which is really weird, because they show rape scenes in films and stuff like that, and they're so intense. But in society as a whole, it's like a chastity was in high regard. So a woman who was virtuous and didn't have a lover, you know, she was well respected. And the men who walked around as knights and everything and denied themselves the pleasantries of the flesh and all of that. It's really what's the word I'm looking for? It's really weird that they did that, but that's how those studio actors and actresses really benefited back in those days. We got my brother Scrapbook Boxing, who has joined us. He says, great fighter. What's good, Stormy B Man? And chat. We got some other people saluting each other. Curtis Anderson says, Chen Kwai Tai was excellent in Mortal Kombat. Yes, he was. And he says, David Chang was great in Deadly Menace. And Scrapbook says, he was, Curtis. What's good, my brother? And I'll tell you all that Tai Lung was best in this film. If you check out his acting in this film, he is doing something that is more than what the average kung fu film star did at the time. He's putting displays of emotion and intensity and yearning and things like that into his role that you just didn't see back then. And I think he won an award that was the Hong Kong equivalent of the Oscars. I think they called it the Golden Horse Award in 1973 for his role in this film. It was actually a film that, you know, he won the award over Bruce Lee and a couple of other people that were considered for the award. Tai Lung was really an accomplished actor, and he was a young guy at the time too. I think he was only in his early to mid 20s where they brought him in, and he was a proponent of Wing Chun Kung Fu also. Wing Chun Kung Fu, as we now know because of the Ip Man films, was an integral part of martial arts during that era. There were a lot of guys who were gravitating toward that particular martial art because other martial arts such as Hung Gar, where you see the actors and actresses when they do their finger like this when they pose, the Hung Gar style was a fist style that goes back to the Shaolin Temple, and it was a very stern style and strong style, so it was well respected in martial arts community. But Wing Chun began to flourish when Ip Man came to Hong Kong, and because he was originally in in Shanghai, so it's like he came to Hong Kong after fleeing through the war, and he began to teach, you know, Wing Chun there, and Ip Man was very versed in the art and well respected in the community. It's amazing that his life didn't start getting told on screen until the last decade or so, when we've seen Donnie Yen play him in classic films now, films that are now considered classics. But getting back to Dynasty of Blood, as Chang Ta-Wai's character was David Chang Ta-Wai, when he was telling the story in the court, he began to go back and tell the story of how they happened upon Tai Lung's character. And the three of them here, you see from left to right, you see Cheng Kwai Tai, Ching Lee, and David Chang Tai Wai. They were the bandits that lived in the mountains, and Cheng Kwai Tai and Ching Lee were married. They were husband and wife, but they were all a part of a racket that lived in the mountains that looted and robbed people. So after happening upon Tai Lung, where he told them that they could become better than what they were as far as becoming bandits and stuff like that, they can look toward being better men and women in society. So, and he was very ambitious. He wanted to become someone of high status in the Qing dynasty. And he thought he could accomplish this by using these two brothers and their men and women who were villagers in the mountains and bandits as his own personal army, where they would go out and challenge other armies, okay, and defeat them, defeat their leaders, and accumulate their men, their soldiers, into their own army, where they ended up, after defeating several different families and groups and gangs, they became almost as an official army of under him that he would face in the Qing dynasty of soldiers. So it's like he had purpose in what he was doing. And so in doing all of this, he thought that if he could convince these guys to be soldiers of under him and he could lead them, it would give him a certain amount of status. But he always had the ambition of going into the Qing dynasty because he wanted to become like a general in the army like that and legitimize. So this was his training ground, using these guys. And they didn't know what his ambition truly was because he did not share it with them. But they did like what they were accomplishing working with him because they were conquering other gangs and becoming stronger and becoming more in numbers and feared. Their reputation became greater as they conquered other families. Now, one of the things that happened during the telling of this story was that Chang Tai Wai, pictured right above me here, he began to suspect something weird about Tai Lung's character. And there were certain things that he was beginning to pick up on about Cheng Kwai Tai's wife and Tai Lung's character. And Ma was his character's name. They always called him Brother Ma. So Ma was very much a regal guy as far as being a knight and a soldier, but his underlying ethic was really as bad as theirs. But they didn't pick up on that right away. But Chang Tai Wai began to say, there's something about him. It's like him and Cheng Kwai Tai's wife, they got a thing going on. And he was picking up on it, And as the film goes on, you're actually able to see through several circumstances that, yes, he did have an interest in Cheng Kwai Tai's wife. One time when the soldiers were working out, she was wondering why they were working so hard and everything. And he explained to her, we got to, in order to be able to conquer our enemies, we have to be in the best shape we can. We have to be sharp. We have to be this, that, and the other. And Cheng Kwai Tai was like, he was enjoying the spoils of their success of conquering other families and gangs. He wanted to go in town and buy his wife some stuff, and them being bandits, going into town was not a good thing. So he was always kind of like bucking the system, where Brother Ma was like, don't do these things. It's not good that you do it. So once when he had left to go into town, and Cheng Kwai Tai was like, Brother Ma was, studying, she happened upon him on a stream, and he was sitting near the bank. And the next thing you know, they were making those cat eyes at each other and everything. And metaphorically, for a kung fu film, it's amazing that they did this. You had to be really smart to pick up on it. she fell into the water. And he jumped in to save her from, drowning or whatever. Even though the water was shallow, he just helped her out the water. And he was like, oh, you're soaked all the way through. And she was like, you too. And they were looking and making those cat eyes at each other and everything. And the next thing you know, it was, it cut to another scene. But you know what happened. He boned her. And so, that was that, And once that took place, she was like, torn between her husband and him now. And when her husband came back with gifts for her, she was like, oh, you went into town and you wasn't supposed to. She sounded like Brother Ma chastising him. And he was like, but I went into town for you and this and that. And so there was like nothing he could do to please her now. It's like all of a sudden she don't, you're sick. You getting on my nerves. That's what happened with her. So as that story played out, David Chang began to watch him more and more, Brother Ma. And he saw that Brother Ma was like, caught him coming out of Brother Ma's chambers. That's when he knew something was up. And that's when he went to Brother Ma and was like, hey, what the hell is going on here, man? You messing with my boy's wife, And he was like, hey, man, he was like, be cool, everything's cool. We, just had a conversation or whatever. He was playing it off, But he decided, like, the one thing he had to do with Chen Kwai is get rid of him so he could have his woman, So he sent him on a suicide mission. And he said that he would reward him with rank and everything when he came back from this mission. And when he went on the mission, David Chang Tawai wasn't able to talk to Chen Kwai before he left. But he wanted to give him a heads up, on some things. But he went on the mission and he told him, he was like, I have to talk to you when I come back. He was like, Brother Ma sending me on this important mission. I got to go. And it was basically on the mission to send him out to his death so he wouldn't return. And then he can have old boy's wife. So, and then the film cuts back to Chang Tawai in the courtroom, writing this stuff down, slamming his fist on the table like that bastard, This is y'all General Ma that you loved and revered in the Qing army. He had rose in status and stature that you guys thought he was so well respected. He was a scumbag. That's what he was trying to say in his writing, And as they tell the story, it just unfolds and unfolds and unfolds. But this was a film that, again, like I said, based around the premises of talking about a woman and how these guys, fought over various, aspects of things in their lives. It showed a lot about, man and man's hearts and woman's hearts. So David Chang Tawai is a character in the film who seems to say a lot with his expressions, but not with words. So he's watching everything that's going on, and he can kind of feel like something is terribly wrong here. And then when the brother Chen Kwai, who's pictured over here, I've got my pointing directions off. When he doesn't return from that mission, he realized that he may have been set up. And then that's when him and Brother Ma, they get into it. But Brother Ma is talking to him like, hey, man, look here. I'm getting to be, big in the army and stuff. He was like, I'm going to leave. And, as I'll call for you guys and, bring you in with us, in the army once I become a general. And that's what happened. He became a general, and he brought them into the army and everything. They had to leave their bandit ways behind and respect him as an official of the court now. And when he sent Chen Kwai on that blood mission, it was after, they had become into the army of the court and everything. That's where he used to block. And so when they came to him, Ching Li, you know, still yearning and panting for him, he pretended like he didn't know her, you know. But it wasn't that. It was just he was playing it off. And that's the moment that when David Chang caught her coming out of his chambers. So, and then he sent the guy away. The guy was murdered, and everything after that changed. You know, she didn't want to accept the truth of her husband being murdered by Brother Ma. She was looking at it more that Brother Ma was trying to discipline him, but his waywardness about himself is what cost him his life. And she was wrong. That wasn't what it was. He met his fate because Brother Ma caused it. And he could have called it off, but he didn't. You know. So as David Chang wrote this in the court records, they were saying that he was lying and that they got to torture him to get the truth out of him and everything. And he was like, no, this is actually what happened. And he was like, he continued to write it down in the court and stuff, even though they were trying to torture him. So he explained why he decided to try to assassinate Brother Ma, because that's what ended up happening. That's what brought him to the court. He tried to assassinate Brother Ma. And as the story went on, you could see that he was trying to take revenge for his brother. That's what that was all about. So as he went into the court, he tried to take Brother Ma down. They faced off against each other, and the army was trying to jump in to help Brother Ma, but he told them to stay back. I got this. Don't worry about it. And they fought, a hell of a duel. It was damn near a duel to the death. But, he went in there trying to stop David Chang. And David Chang fought with him, nip and tuck. He stabbed Brother Ma. And as everything worked itself out, the army was able to take David Chang into custody. But I'll tell you something about this film. Dynasty of Blood is based on a factual events in Chinese history. But it played out very well for a kung fu film. This film was actually remade years later. I think it's in 2007 with Jet Li. And it was called Blood Brothers again. And in this film, where Jet Li is playing the Tai Lung character, okay? And there's not as much fighting in the newer remake, which I understand that they were trying to make it like, it's a more modern film. And even though it took place in those times, they took away the action, which made this film so great. You had great performances in the original film. And the Jet Li film actually has a scene where when he's going with the brother's wife on a boat, and the David Chang character is watching from the shore. And there's this great shot of Jet Li looking over at the shore and seeing old boy on the shore, and he got the brother's wife with him, and he closes the shutter on the on the boat. And it was like, man, it was so cold-blooded. I was like, now that was a classic scene right there that would have fit perfectly in this film, because Tai Lung's character was that guy. But that was the one part about that movie I really liked, when Jet Li closed that door looking at old boy like, you bastard, what you gonna do? It was great stuff. It was great stuff, man. I loved it. Great stuff, man. But I'll tell you something. Dynasty of Blood, a.k.a. Blood Brothers, was an action film with these guys that was above the average Hong Kong Kung Fu film, and it was above the average Shaw Brothers film. The costumes, the robes, the settings were all excellent in this film. Love seeing it, love watching this film. It's one of my favorites from Shaw's. I just watched it again a few nights ago, and I meant to watch it actually. I actually was going to put it on and then fell asleep. But it's in my collection. It's a great film. The story is great. The performances are great. Just to see these actors come across as they do, man, it's something to behold. When you could watch a quality kung fu film where the action is up here and the acting is up here, the production values are up here, that makes it a 4 to 5 star film as far as martial arts. Some martial art films are just 4 to 5 stars based on the action alone. But when you can draw the performances out of the actors, when you can draw the set design and costume design to really take you and put you in a place where you're, acknowledging that the film has taken you somewhere in time, that's when it becomes excellent. That's when it becomes excellent. We got the Underrated Darkness is out there. He says, Stormy B-Man salute. He's saluting the LDBC. He's saluting Kurt and Scrapbook and Derek Bailey. Yes, sir. That's what it is, man. These films, I'll tell you something. If you haven't had a chance to check out this particular movie, please watch it, because I guarantee you will enjoy it. I think it's out here on Amazon Prime. I don't think it's on YouTube. YouTube doesn't play a lot of the Shaw Brothers stuff because of the licensing. But Dynasty of Blood, aka Blood Brothers, is a great film to watch. It is, really. I know we have dropped on and off with our people that's in the watching in the chat and everything. I was wondering if anybody out there had any questions or had anything that they wanted to say if they happen to see this film, that we can drive the conversation a little bit further. I would have provided clips, but Shaw Brothers is real stickler on their clips of their films, so I just provided still photographs. And I hope nobody's upset about that, because, just showing you these great shots from the film is good. It's just that I don't want to be flagged for showing their, their clips and everything with not having the rights to do so. But I hope that you guys are enjoying this review on this film. You will find, if you go back and you watch the film for yourself, that my review of it is spot on, and that to get someone to get into this genre, I try to always introduce a film in a certain kind of way so that that, this is quality. This is quality stuff. I will not send you to watch some garbage. You know what I mean? Never, ever, ever. You don't have to worry about Stormy B-Man doing that. I will find quality material to present to you guys, when you're listening out there. So I know Curtis was out there. Curtis, if you're still out there, did you have any questions or something that you wanted to say about this film? You could write it in the chat for me. Underrated Darkness, same with you, or Derek Bailey. And I know that early on we had E. Woodson out there. Please don't hesitate, brothers. You could just leave me some comments in the chat and we can keep this going. I'll usually take this show to an hour. We're about 50 minutes in, so I got about 10 more minutes on the show that we could do. Curtis says Tai Lung and David Chang were great in all of their films. Yeah, man, they were like, Robert Redford and what's his name? Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Robert Redford and what's the brother's name? Steve McQueen. Those guys, they were like that. They could give great performances, no matter how great or small their roles were in the films. And I don't even have a numerology of how many films they did together, but they did almost every film that they starred in with Shaw Brothers. 90% of them, they were in with one another. Curtis is asking, what was their first film? Their first film together, Kurt, I think it was Vengeance. Back in 1970, 1971, Vengeance. Another film that I will get around to reviewing. I think that was their first film in together where they had lead roles. But they were both in the One-Armed Boxer films with Jimmy Wong Yu. I think the One-Armed Swordsman, forgive me, because One-Armed Boxer is a totally different film. One-Armed Swordsman. One-Armed Swordsman Part 2. Tai Lung was in that as an extra. He was like a soldier that was walking with the lady, protecting her on the road, and he got killed and stuff. And David Chang was a guy who did stunt work. And he came from a prominent family in the industry, actually, David Chang. And he started off like a stunt man. They called him the Rubber Man because he could do gymnastics and do the stunts off of the trampolines very easily because his frame was very slight and he could move like a worm, you know. So and someone thought to give him a leading role. And they also played in a film together called Dead End and Generation Gap, which were not martial art films, but they were films of the genre that told the story of youth. And they were both in their early 20s back then. So that's why those guys, you know, they had long career with Shaw's. Even though the 7-year contract was a thing with Shaw's, they both lasted with Shaw's a lot longer than 7 years. So that's what happened with them. Curtis says, that's where I know them from. Yes, sir. Yeah, they have always been around, man. You know, even in their late teens, their early 20s, they were around before they got out in front of the cameras as leading men. Very productive and prolific careers for both men. Like I said, if you could believe it, they didn't really care for each other behind the scenes. And to see them, you know, perform on screen the way that they were able to do so, it's like amazing that they were able to do the things that they were able to accomplish and the box office success that they enjoyed with their films. I enjoy both guys' work. I enjoy their work independently. I enjoy their work, you know, working together. They were the talents of the early stages of the studio when they were going toward these kind of films. And what's interesting is Chang Che, like Jimmy Wong Yu moved on, right? And then these brothers came along, Tai Lung, David Chang, Chen Kwa Tai, and they became his like second stable of actors, okay? And then after that, there were the Venoms. The Venoms came along, about 6 or 7 guys, and those guys were his like third stable of actors who would perform in film. Now another screen star that came along during these guys' era, who was going to be his own little thing, was Alexander Fushing. Alexander Fushing was a tremendous talent who around this time was in his late teens. And he played Fong Si-yu in some of the early Shaolin Temple films and Shaolin Warrior films where they were depicting Hung Si-kwan and Fong Si-yu. And Fushing played those roles early with these guys. And the noted director and action choreographer Lau Char-yang loved Fushing. Fushing became a student of his because he taught these guys, you know, at the studio, real martial arts. and he admired Fushing's athletic ability and ability to take up technique on screen. And he had a boyish charm and charisma that none of the other stars had. And it was very tragic when he died in 1983 in a car crash, because he was well loved by the fans and everyone he worked with in the studios. Fushing was a great guy. And Fushing had something in his eyes. He had a real charismatic persona on the screen. Something in his eyes that was kind of similar to other leading men who were able to get a following, you know, through dramatic roles or action roles or whatever. Fushing could convey all of those emotions, a lot like Tai Lung. So, and another actor, an action star who came along right under these guys was Quan Chung. That's the brother who played in some of the Shaolin Warrior films too, kind of muscular, tall and slender, but muscular. That's Quan Chung, and he played in the Shaolin Temple films too. And these guys were all actors who were very prominent during this era. I would say 1972 to 1978 was a tremendous time for the Shaw Studios with their numerous contracted actors. There was a period of time where they all played in one film. It was called the 10 Tigers of Quan Chung or something like that. And these guys were all in there. And to see them, it was like an ensemble film. Can you imagine seeing all of your favorite actors, whether it's, you know, Denzel Washington and Tom Cruise and all these guys being all in a film together? And it not be a Dirty Dozen type film, but just some kind of featured story where it's just so many actors and actresses who are in that as a part of an ensemble. That's what these guys were doing when they teamed up in those roles. And it really made for quality theater. It really made for great action, because the director, Liu Chaoyang, he had talent galore at his fingertips when he was doing those ensemble films with these guys. And I'll look to, you know, reviewing some of the other Shaw Brothers films, but I'm slowly getting into the Shaw Brothers titles, not because I feel forced or because I have nothing else to talk about. There are far more independent films I'd like to cover as well, but these films, I know them like the back of my hand, is because I've seen them so many times. And you know, whether they're in their original Mandarin language or if they're dubbed in English, I know exactly what's happening with these films because of seeing them so many times and because they're quality films. Shaw Brothers was head and shoulders above the rest of Southeast Asia when they put out movies. And they put out all genres. They had action films, they had spy movies, they had horror films, they had like romantic films, they had musicals. Man, they were just solid with so much that they put out. They had a remastered library of films by Celestial Pictures in the early 2000s that lasted to the end of like 2009, 2010, where over 800 films from their catalog were remastered on DVD, and now some of them have even moved to Blu-ray. Awesome stuff, man. If you haven't had a chance to check that stuff out, please do, because the Celestial release of the Shaw films is awesome. A lot of those films look so good on DVD, they look like brand new movies, the way that they remastered them. And if you could see what they looked like before being remastered, oh my goodness. So great stuff by the Shaw Brothers, you know, great stuff by the Shaw Brothers. Does anyone else have any questions out there or whatever regarding these films or this film in particular? Because this was a great film. You got to check it out. If you haven't seen it and you like Kung Fu films, you haven't seen all that you need to see you need to check out Blood Brothers, Chinese Vengeance, Dynasty of Blood. Those are three of the most popular titles. You can look for them out there. You'll find it. Like I said, it's definitely on Amazon Prime. It always pops up on my Amazon Prime when I go on there, because I watch Kung Fu films on there, even though I have them in my collection and I don't want to pull a movie out of this case. You know, I watch them on Amazon Prime. Very entertaining. And the ones on Amazon Prime are usually dubbed in English, so you can enjoy that if you're a person. But I don't mind watching them in their native language, Mandarin. I'll even, I could watch them with subtitles or without subtitles, because I've seen the films so many times that I just enjoy them like that. You know what I mean? So that's what I do, and I'm glad that you guys, tuned in this evening to check me out for this little review on Dynasty of Blood, a film that I really enjoyed presenting to you. These are great performers. These men and lady are familiar faces from the genre, and they've always done great work. And they've collaborated on more than a few films in their careers. So, but that's pretty much it, man. This is Stormy B, man. I thank you guys for tuning in. Hey, man, until next time, I try not to flood the market with these films, because I could do one of these a week or whatever, but, I know everybody is not watching the Kung Fu films like that, but, hey, in this time that there's not much boxing going on, you could check out a Kung Fu film, man, especially one that I've recommended. I haven't had a person yet in life, not just out here on the YouTube airwaves, but I haven't had a person in life tell me that a film that I recommended to them was some bull crap. Not one. Because when I recommend them, I know what to recommend and I know what not to recommend. Especially if I know you personally and I know what your tastes are, I can direct you and point you right to something that you could say, oh, wow, yeah, this. But even for the layman that may not know nothing about Kung Fu films, I could recommend the film to them, because I know what the points are that can capture an American audience's attention when it comes to a film. All you have to do is like an action film. If you like an action film, no problem. If you are into other films of the genre, like I mentioned a moment ago, I can still help you out with that. You know what I mean? And that's what I could do. Get them out there to you. Get them out there to you and help you, build your interest in the films. We got Walter Wilder out there. He stopped in and says, "What's up, Brother Storm?" Yeah, what's going on, Walter Wilder? But yeah, that's going to be it for this evening. I'm sorry, Walter, you came in a little late. The show is just about wrapping up, but I appreciate you stopping by all the same. Could you please go back and hit the like button? And if you came in late or whatever, catch this on the replay, because this is a great film that we covered this evening. And I look forward to talking about more films in the future with you guys. So, let that be known out there. It's Stormy B, man. It's been Kung Fu Film Focus. And I'm going to be out of here. Catch you guys on the next one, man. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the week. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central, to the Three Wise Men of Boxing, because we're doing a new show, Three Wise Men of Boxing. We're doing Puerto Rico's great fighters. That's right. We're covering the fighters from Puerto Rico, So peace to everybody. Have a good night. See you soon.